Hey folks, it's your main man Sabado back again. I talk a lot about, I guess I just talk a lot, but I talk a lot about this channel not just being about me pontificating about information. I mean, I have a background that I am able to share. I retired at 51. I was a chief human resources officer when I retired, so I have a little bit of information behind the curtain, and I want to share that with you. But where the rubber really hits the road is when I get questions from you, the subscribers, about this stuff. And so today I am incredibly excited to share with you a couple of comments that I received and provide answers to those questions that I think may help you live your best life and potentially move you closer towards early retirement. My first question or comment comes from Big Bobby 555. And he says, my question / background, sorry about the length. I'm feeling progressively burned out in my work and am thinking of leaving earlier than a typical retiree, and my public sector employer covers retiree health insurance for people who have been with the organization for so many years. But the policy is written a little unclearly to know whether that is for those who retire early or who wait until they are eligible for their full pension. I would like clarity on this to help me decide if I want to stick it out. I'm close, less than 4 years from a full pension, and 1.5 years from when a reduced pension would start. And the value of the pension ratchets up more quickly after 25 years. But those last 3 years have been getting rough, and I'm not sure that new leadership is in the same direction I want to keep going. Would simply asking that question of HR raise red flags or get back to management and cause me a problem if I'm a few years away from being able to fully retire? So that's the first one. And the second question is, and I'm giving you both of them, and I normally don't do a 2-in-1, but today I'm going to do a 2-in-1 because they're both connected. And I think some of the same answer will impact both of these. So the other one is from Julio Blanco 302. Very sage advice, Sabado, and appreciate you pulling back the curtain and giving us this free game. On a separate but related topic, have you ever heard of a company requiring a 90-day notice period for retirement? Is this common in your experience? As always, appreciate the insight and dash of throwback music references. So before I go any further, I've got to tell you that the throwback music references, and those of you that have been rocking with me for a while know that I just go off, but that's just in my stream of consciousness. When I'm in a place and I'm listening and I got a beat in my head, then that beat comes out. And so if it comes out, cool. If it doesn't, my bad. I apologize in advance. But let me try to tackle these two important issues because I think these are things that happen to a lot of us. Organizations, they want things, but the policy says something different. Or they set up policies that say a certain thing, and then the question becomes, who can you trust with some of this information? So the first thing I want to talk about is giving notice of your retirement. Different organizations, based on size, scope, and the way that they're spread out and distributed, may require longer notice periods as a matter of policy. And so the question becomes, well, why would they do that? Well, depending on the type of environment. So in a public sector organization that has a lot of bureaucratic departments that manage a bunch of things, there might be specific processes and protocols that have to take place in order for you to retire on time. So in order for you to get your first check when you need your first check, in order to have your sick time conversion, in order to have your retiree health set up, in order to get the basic pension calculations and all of that paperwork, some organizations may require longer than the standard 2-week notice. Now, in my experience, I haven't seen that. I have not seen an organization require a 90-day notice in order for you to retire. So the question that I would ask back, and again, I hate answering the question with the question, but I do think I have answered this question directly, is this hearsay? Is this somebody telling you that this is the policy? Is this your manager telling you what they would like to happen? or is this something that's actually documented in the policy? And if it's something that's documented specifically in the policy, then I would ask the question of why is this in the policy? Every policy should have a why and not just a what, because it should be trying to accomplish something. And generally, if you go across most organizations in a similar industry, they'll have similar policies, but there's always a why and there's a reason for it. And so the first thing I would try to figure out is that a ironclad or a bona fide policy, or is this just something that over the water cooler somebody says, hey, it would be nice if you can give 90 days, or that's what somebody does? And now generally, depending on the level of position that you're in, I would go as high as maybe a month, maybe 2 months if you have a good relationship, if it works out for you, if you feel like it's the right thing to do, because what's right for me may not always be right for you. But I wouldn't just take the word that it's a 90-day policy. And I will tell you that it's not incredibly common. Most policies will stipulate a 2-week notice period if you're going to resign, and a retirement is just another form of a resignation. So I would go back and try to figure out. I wouldn't necessarily start asking people the question, because when you start asking that question, people start reading into it. And as people read into it, then people start talking mess. And then when people start talking mess, they fill in the voids with misinformation and rumors, and then you end up with a whole other situation. And then all of a sudden, you're this disgruntled employee that now has an issue. So in my past, because of the level of positions that I've carried, I've generally given a month notice, but I've been running large departments for large organizations that were very complex and had a lot of moving parts and big handoffs. But most people don't do that. I mean, if you do, please let me know. But most people don't have jobs like that, and so it doesn't require that, and it doesn't help. But then the funny thing is then when I think about Big Bobby's comment, and he's talking about, is my retiree health going to be impacted if I retire early? That creates another dynamic. See, because you have one person that's saying that the organization is telling you that you have to have 90 days. And then you have a person who's saying, I want to retire sooner than 4 years from now. But if I do, is that going to create a problem for me? Because it's my HR team going to say something. And so just for full transparency, I did ask the question back of how is your HR department distributed? If your HR department is distributed with a division that sets standalone, then the chances of that information getting back to your manager are very slim. But if you have an HR department that's in your office that's fairly small, then you always have to remember that everybody trusts somebody. And I say that to say that somebody's going to say, hey, did you hear that They're going to talk to a good friend. Hey, did you hear that Big Bobby is leaving? And it becomes a rumor, and then it spreads around because people like to talk, and people don't know how to shut the hell up sometimes and not talk about things that aren't their business. And unfortunately, unless you just talk to one person, it gets around. And this is not to demonize the people in any of your organizations, but we all have to remember that there's one person that we all trust. And so somebody tells us something, we go tell, hey, don't tell anybody else. Don't tell anybody. But everybody has that one person, and those people are usually different people for different people. So I may come to you, Bobby, and say, this is, I'm trusting you with this, and this is it. And I may just talk to you about it. But you may not feel that way about me, and you may have another person that's your confidant that you go to and you talk to. So I think the idea would be, if you have this concern, then there's something behind that. So I would not ask the question in the way that you're going to ask the question, or that you're thinking of asking the question. However, I do think that because what's at stake is so high, your peace of mind and how you feel is so high, I do think you need to pursue the answer to that question. So if you're looking at asking that question, I would maybe think about how I ask it. I would maybe ask the question in such a way where I say, hey, HR, I'm retiring in about 4 years, and I'm trying to get my head around the employee health component. So how does that work, and how do I make sure I'm signed up for that? And when should I start? And should I go 2 years out? Should I do it a year out? What should I do? And they'll tell you. And then you can ask, well, if something were to happen, I left early. Let's say something happened and I didn't make it to that 4 years, then what happens if I do that? And so then what you're doing is you're asking the question in a general way, and you're not even really tying it to any imminent action. You're just tying it to the fact I just want general information. And that way, if it ever comes back to you, then it's just general information. But the thing I think is critically important, Bobby, and I think for all of you out there, is prioritize your mental health as it relates to leaving your organization. And because the situation that you laid out in your comment is similar to the situation I had. I worked for an organization. They thought it was bigger than it was. It was a smaller organization. There were a lot of cliques, and there was a lot of drama, and there's a lot of gossip, and there's a lot of favoritism. And I had a boss who wasn't the most supportive. He was the guy that would say, "Oh, I don't know much about HR. I don't understand HR." But what we're not talking about HR. We're talking about business process. And so, if you're the CEO, you should understand business process and leave the HR stuff up to the HR person. But he didn't do that. And so there were a series of things that happened from the second week I was there that just continued to grate on me, grate on me, and grate on me. And so I was there for about 2 years. And so by the time I left, because of the toxicity that I was experiencing that he was supporting, it really impacted me. So when I left, and I'm not going to say I had a chip on my shoulder, but it was affecting me in a lot of different ways. People I knew were expressing to me how it made them feel because of how I would respond to things and so on. So prioritize your mental health. Make sure that you do what's right for you, because if you got to go now, or if you need to go in the near future, then I would suggest that you start looking at ways to make that happen in the near future. Because even if you get retiree health, and let's say you're not eligible for another year, then you might pay $400 a month or whatever on the Affordable Care Act exchanges. Again, different states are different. I don't have all of the information to give you full guidance, but what I will say is with the Affordable Care Act, private pay, or I just call it private pay for the sake of this conversation, healthcare is incredibly less expensive than it would have been prior to that, where you would have had to pay thousands of dollars just to get basic care, just to have catastrophic care. And, just to give you some perspective, again, pulling it back, is when I left my organization, I hadn't planned on retiring for about 3 or 4 years after I did. Maybe longer than that. Maybe, let me see, I retired. It would have been about 5 years after. But because the situation was so bad, the question that I had for my financial advisor and for my wife is there a way to do this sooner, and how can we make it work? And that's what we did. And I think that's the situation that you're going to find yourself in. So don't just go to your HR people and just ask them, hey, if I do this, because now what you're doing is you're doing exactly what Paul Masson said he didn't want you to do when he was selling wine in the 80s. Don't sell wine before your time. Don't put it out there, because once you put it out there, then you set up the rumor mill. But there's a way to ask those questions that keep you from communicating what your intentions are. And so as long as you do that, then it's all anecdotal. And then if it ever comes back around, then your defense is, I was just asking the question. I just wanted to know. So again, I want to take a moment to thank you, Big Bobby, 5555, and Julio Blanco 302, I believe it is. Julio Blanco 302. Great questions. I always appreciate your comments down in the comment section. They're always really thoughtful, and they help me stay on track. And I know we've had some situations in the past where I might have been misunderstood, and you challenged me to come forward and really clarify my position. So I ask that any of you that are unclear about anything that I've ever said on this channel, ask the question. If it's constructive, I'm always going to answer. And I have a saying in my personal circles that if I care about you enough to answer the question, it's always going to be the truth. I care about you. This channel is for you. My experience is here to help you. My personal mission statement is to uplift the human condition. And so if I walked out of here and said I didn't want to answer this question, my wife would say to me, well, Sabado, how's that uplifting the human condition? And then I would hold myself accountable to that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. And I hope these answers were helpful for you and for others. And for those of you that are not subscribed to the channel, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Of the hundreds of thousands of viewers that I've had, less than 1% have subscribed to the channel. And so there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's really about building a community where we can all learn from each other's experience. I learn from the comments that are in the comment section, and I also learn from just doing the research on questions that you have. And it's my hope that I can learn and turn that around and help you in this way. So on that note, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.